started with the webinar. Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. If you could, oh, hello, Robert. If everyone could just let me know whether or not you can hear me, that would be great. I don't seem to be hearing anyone. Oh dear, that's not good. Yes, I am speaking. And who sent that to me? Julie, I don't seem to be hearing anyone. Are you speaking? Maybe if I...
Hello.
Oh, there somebody spoke.
Oh, hey, Julie.
Oh, hi, Robert. So now you can hear me.
Yeah.
And Natalie, can you hear us now? Hello, Natalie. Doesn't appear to be. Okay. Yes, okay. I'm getting a little bit of a feedback. So Robert, oh, thank you. Okay, great. All right, well, welcome everyone to today's Public Librarians chat. And today we are going to be discussing the Public Library Report. And if people wanted to tell us where the name of their library and the town where they are joining us from, that would be great. If you want to enter that into the chat box, that would be nice for the rest of us to know where you are from. As I mentioned earlier, I'm joining you guys all from Juneau at the Alaska State Library. So before we get started, I have this slide, and it kind of shows whether you're a new person to filling out the Public Library Report or whether you've done it for years. And if you want to use the little marker that is located on the upper left-hand side of your screen, and if you click on it, it will allow you to then make an X on this line to just let everybody know where you are. And I'm going to go ahead and do it myself and let you know that I am still a relative newbie. I don't fill the report out for the Alaska State Library, but I do oversee the reports that are coming back. So if everybody wants to go ahead and mark up the screen, that'd be awesome. Can everybody see it?
I can see it, but it's grayed out.
Oh, what is grayed out? The marker?
The marker icon, yeah.
Oh, no. So when you click on it, nothing happens?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, dear. Well, then go ahead and just enter into the chat box, everybody, where you are. And I'm sorry. I tested it out earlier, but maybe for some reason it isn't working properly. So just let us know. And if you don't want to, if you're too shy to do that, that's fine. This webinar is designed for newbies and for masters. And hopefully everybody will get something out of this webinar today. All righty. So I will unclick that and move on. Okay. So on this slide is a list of the things you will hopefully know by the end of the webinar. And I will also spend the last part of the webinar discussing some common reporting issues that we often see with the Alaska Public Library Report. Any questions about anything so far? We're just getting started. Okay. So just a quick welcome to everybody that's joined us. We have Tara now and Mary Perry. So welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
Okay. So Mary, if you wouldn't mind just muting your microphone, unless you have something to add, because we get a bit of a feedback, and I promise to allow lots of time for people to ask questions.
Okay, I don't know how to do that. Should I just mute the whole thing?
No, I'll try. I think I can mute it, but then you won't be able to talk. Well, that's not really good. Well, we'll just leave it as it is. Okay. So why are you required to fill out the Public Library Report? Well, The Alaska Administrative Code requires a library to file a grant final report with the state library for each grant that it receives. And libraries receiving the Public Library Assistance grants must also file an annual report and a technology report. And what we've done is go ahead and incorporate those 3 reports into a single web-based public library report. So we're trying to make it easier for you guys. This morning we did notify libraries that the public library report is open and ready for them to begin inputting their data, and the deadline for submitting your report is September 3rd. And I just want to mention that libraries that have not submitted their public library report are not eligible to apply for future grants until all of the requirements for past grants are met. So oftentimes we have change in library leadership and somebody new comes in and they really don't know what to report on or how to report on, and we still encourage them to do their best, because if they don't, then they won't be able to apply for the next year's grant. So the data from the annual reports is published. We publish them as an Excel file and also as a CSV file, and they're available for download on the Alaska Public Library Statistics webpage. And if I think I can enter this URL. It's kind of a long one, but I'll give it a shot here. I should bring it up and just copy paste. Let me see if I can do that real quick here. It'd be a lot easier for you guys and for me as well. Okay, I'm going to just do that. I'm not sure if it is or not. And I'm going to send it. Okay, so there's that URL to that web page where that information is found. And some of the data from the public library reports is also submitted each year to the Institute of Museum and Library Services and included in the publication, which is, aptly titled Public Libraries in the United States Survey, which compiles data from just about every public library in the United States. So that's 9,000 public libraries with approximately 17,000 individual public library outlets. And they've been collecting that survey since 1988. So when I mentioned that some of the data is shared with the IMLS, I'll explain that further in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to do a quick shout out. When I was preparing for this webinar, I read the draft version of A Landscape of Major U.S. Public Library Data Collection Efforts. It's a working paper for the Measures That Matters initiative project. And for some of you that were able to attend the Using Data to Tell Your Library Story, the presenter of that workshop is also heavily involved in Measures That Matter. And the great thing about Measures That Matter is that it's basically comparing and contrasting the 5 major library data collection efforts that are currently undergoing, and one of which is the Public Library Survey. So there's really good information about the Public Library Survey in here. So the Public Library Survey is administered annually by the IMLS through state data coordinators. And the data from these reports, it's accessible about 2 years after it's been submitted. And that data is used by the federal government, the state, and local officials for planning, evaluation, and policy decisions. And as I mentioned earlier, the national data is recorded in the publication Public Libraries in the United States Survey, as well as some data tables that are found on this website. And I'll see if I can get that URL to you as well. All right. And I want to read the stated purpose of the PSL survey because I think it's important. So public libraries across the nation fill important educational, informational, economic, cultural, and recreational needs of the people they serve. And their continuing ability to fill these needs is essential to the life of the nation. Wow, isn't that cool? Reliable, consistent public library statistics will provide both the basis for effective management and a continuing assessment of the status of public libraries. And I want to highlight the reliable and consistent statistics part, which is really why I'm presenting this webinar, and I hope to present during a conference on the Public Library Report as well, because I think it's really important that our libraries, they spend a considerable amount of time completing this report. I think on national average, libraries spend 40 hours completing these kind of reports. So that's 40 hours that you spend completing the report, and we want to make sure that the data and everything is really good and solid. But on the state level, state libraries, they spend on average 104 hours working with this data, getting it ready to go to the IMLS. That's so much time. And so anything that we can do to streamline the process and improve the reliability and the validity of the data is super important. So that's really why I'm offering this webinar. And because we get so many questions from people who have no idea what they're supposed to do when they're new librarians, they've never heard of this report, and they're just completely lost. So 70 of the questions that you see in the Alaska Public Library Report come directly from the PLS. And the remaining questions are ones that the Alaska State Data Coordinator has added, and they've been added over time. Those remaining, the data from those questions are not shared with the IMLS. It's strictly for our own use, for our own evaluative, and policy-making uses. You're lucky because some state libraries have like over 1,000 questions. So, so Alaska's kind of in the middle. I think we have like 324 questions in our report, which isn't too bad. We might want to review them and streamline them. I think that's something that we can definitely look at doing in the future, because libraries change and you don't need to be asking questions that really aren't necessary if the services are being changed. So this is a screenshot from the IMLS Public Library Survey website, and you can see barely up here at the top that the data that's listed, the most current data that's listed is from FY 2014. And just a quick note that when I was exploring this site, I found it easier to use the tools when I was using Firefox as my browser. So are there any questions so far about the Alaska State Public Library Report and how it fits in with the Public Library Survey? And
Julie, I have one.
Hi.
You mentioned that some states have more questions than others, and I took that to mean that not every state is collecting the same data, which is new to me. So that's definitely the case. And how do the state data coordinators, I guess, decide, where we're going to be similar and where states are going to be different?
So every state is asking the 70 questions that are included in the PLS. So every state includes those questions. But some states require their public libraries to be certified, or they have certification requirements. And so some of them really wildly vary. And I mentioned earlier, and I'll be happy to share this document with you, even though it's a draft document, the landscape of major U.S. public library data collection efforts. And they list every state. And some of the states, like Wisconsin, are close to almost 2,000 questions. It's amazing how many questions they ask. Other states strictly only ask the 70 questions required by the Public Library Survey. So it just varies wildly, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Measures That Matter initiative is taking place. It's to find out what can we do to streamline this, or are we asking for the same data from several different places? Is this even something that we should be doing? So. Did that answer your question, Robert?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the responsibility for ensuring the Public Library Report, the Alaska Public Library Report, is submitted on time, that the information is accurate, the report is complete. It really falls on the shoulders of the library director. And in some situations, the library director may need to work with somebody from City Hall, from the borough, or from the school district financial office in order to complete the report. In those situations, it's still really the responsibility of the library director to provide that person with complete and accurate records and to ensure that the report is submitted on time. And there's lots of things that you can, I know now we're getting ready to, we just opened it up for you guys to report last year, but for people that are new library directors, you can start by reviewing the Alaska Public Library worksheet, which I'll show you where that's linked from. Look through the worksheet, which basically is like a printout of the report. Note any unfamiliar terms or confusing questions, and identify where you're going to find that information for each question, or who in your organization could provide you with the information that you need. In order for the data to be of value and really usable, it needs to be reliable and it needs to be valid. And so reliability really refers to, if we repeated the findings, or if you were asked to provide the data again, would it be the same data? Or would it wildly fluctuate? And validity really refers to the credibility or believability of the findings. And sometimes we get data that is just wildly unbelievable. So if you're in a community of 2,000 people, but your circulation for a particular object is like in 200,000 times something circulated in a year, it kind of stretches credibility. So, and it may be that your system isn't counting it accurately, or how the manner in which you're collecting the information isn't very good. But so it really is helpful if you collect the statistics monthly, and if you record any changes or in the manner in which you collected the information, or if there were changes in periods of collection. I know sometimes libraries close because of renovations, so if your attendance dropped off because the library was closed for 6 weeks, that totally makes sense, and you just need to make a note about that. And again, share the responsibility for gathering those statistics. If you have a programming person in your library, make it their responsibility to gather the attendance, programming attendance statistics. And also just set an early deadline for meeting the report due date. So the Alaska Public Library Report System portal is available from the For Librarians web page. And if you're not familiar with that, everybody should have received hopefully an email this morning with the link to the portal, but I'll include it in here as well. And so you probably want to, and you can see it, I've kind of highlighted it, it's kind of under the For Alaskan Librarians heading there. And so you probably want to bookmark this for the future. In order to access the portal, you do need to have a username and password, a username and a password. And that information, like I mentioned, is unique for every library. If you don't know what that is, you can contact me after this webinar. I'm happy to provide it to you. Again, you should have received an email with that information today. Linked from the Alaska Public Library Report System is a worksheet, that worksheet that I mentioned earlier, which you can use to compile information before you actually input your data. There's instructions for using LibPath, the online web form that we use. And then after you've input your data, verified it, submitted, and locked it, you do need to print out the certification form, and you'll see it's linked on there. Complete that and mail that to us. Are there any questions about any of that? Okay, again, this is just that the username and password are required in order for logging in. So in the earlier email, I mentioned that we did make some changes to this online form. I think last year was the first year that we used it. One of the things that we changed is some of the information fields that you'll see are now grayed out, and those are ones that probably shouldn't change. The name of your library, your street address, zip code, that kind of thing. If they have changed, you just need to make a note in the note field, and we'll fix that data at a later time. The reason we grayed those out and made it so that you can't really change the information in there is because when we submit the data to the IMLS, we get so many edit checks back because of common little errors, like instead of Cordova Public Library, and I'm not blaming, this is just an example, a made-up example, but someone might have typed in Cordova Community Library, or instead of 601 First Street spelled out, it might have been 601 the number 1 ST and street. And so those kind of errors generate errors. We have to spend a lot of time going back and correcting all of them and resubmitting the data. So if your library did actually physically move, or your zip code actually changed, or the number changed or whatever, you can make a note in the note field. And that's that little sheet of paper with looks like a pen or whatever. You just click on that and type in what it should be, and it will notify us that this is something that we need to fix on our end. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. So again, gray areas are locked, and if the information in those fields have changed, you just need to add a comment in the note field. And this is what the note field looks like. You just type into this little chat, like it looks like a chat box, and click on add. And the great thing about the note fields is you can reuse notes later on. So if you have lots of data that hasn't changed from the previous year, you can just click on the note field and select a previous note that you've already created and kind of add it. So you don't have to retype in a note every time. So I just want to make sure that I read my notes here myself. When you double click on the note icon, this text box appears. Be sure to click on the add button located underneath. And once you've created a note field, you can reuse it over and over. Okay. On the report, you'll notice that some of the questions have a green check mark. And actually, I'm going to go back to a couple screens here. Oh, no, it's a good example. So in this example, it's registered users. And this green check mark indicates that edit checks on our personal edit checks have been enabled. So if you add the same number of registered users, like in this case, if the person completed this, added the same number, 2,386, it's going to prompt you to explain why that number hasn't changed from last year. And again, I'm not picking on Cordova. I hope she's okay with it. I just, picked her out of all the other reports. But some libraries have consistently reported the same data year to year, which prompts edit checks from the IMLS. They want to know why those libraries, it hasn't been changing. And so on our end, we've decided to enable several fields, and you'll see as you go through, that are now requiring you, if you add the same information in any of these fields that has a green check mark as the previous year, it's going to ask you to explain why you are doing so, why that hasn't changed. And so for registered users, it should change year to year. You're either adding users or you're dropping them. It should not be stagnant. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, moving on. If you're a new director and unsure how your library was established, you can definitely contact the state library and find out. We do keep a file for every library, and it includes that kind of information. So I know some libraries, they don't answer the question because they're not sure how to answer it. So if you have a question and you're not sure, was my library established by an ordinance or whatever, contact us. We'll be happy to provide you with that information. I included this screen because this part of the report, because this is a part that lots of people kind of get tripped up on. It's a little bit confusing, I agree. And so the question here is about library staff and librarians with an MLS. So if your library, like in this example, I've included an example. This is a library director with an MLS. So there's just the one librarian with an MLS. She has a children's librarian, that's the title of that person, as well as she's the librarian. So there's two people with the title of librarian, and she has 2 library assistants. And so, you know, you're looking at this and you're thinking, I should add up to 5, but you really don't count that 3-1. The fields that are being counted are 3-2 and 3-3. So, you know, if your library does not have anybody with an MLS, obviously you're going to leave it a 0 there. And I just wanted to just remind everybody that you really should have all of your fields should have something entered into it. If you don't have, you can't really leave them blank. It won't verify if you do that. So you don't want to leave it blank. If you don't have anything to report, just report a 0. Any questions about this one? Okay. This is another question that kind of trips people up. And what we're asking is for the beginning salary for each of these positions. If you don't have in your library, there's nobody with, who's a technical assistant, you'll leave it blank. If you don't have section heads, you leave it blank. But if your library does have those titles, then just go ahead and enter your beginning salary for each position. Lots of our libraries are completely volunteer ran. Nobody receives a salary or a stipend or anything. And so they would just put 0s in these fields. Okay? This information is not shared with the IMLS, and it's also not included on that Alaska State Library statistics page. This information is for our own use, and we are often contacted by cities and municipalities with requests for information about like how much, you know, they have a position they're trying to recruit for, how much should that salary be for the librarian. So sometimes, you know, we answer those kind of questions. Also used for gauging the salary range of similar sized libraries and also to justify salaries. Did somebody have a question?
Hey, Julie, this is Joe.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi. So that I couldn't find my mute button or unmute button, but going back one where you're talking about how many employees you have. So like I have 6 employees, but if I add up all of their hours because they're all just on call, it equates to 2 positions. So that would be 2, not 6, correct?
Right. And so in this case, I didn't break it out into full-time. You know, I just assumed that everybody was full-time. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but most of us all have part-timers.
Right. And unfortunately, I didn't want to get into the math, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, that's true. And it is counted as full-time equivalent employees. And again, sometimes becomes confusing for people in volunteer libraries because they're working a 10-hour week, even though it's a volunteer week. A volunteer position, and that's considered full-time for them, and so sometimes we have lots of questions about that. But in this case, it is a 40-hour a week. Full-time is based on 40 hours a week.
Thank you.
And some of you have been filling out the form for years. Do you have anything to share? Some of you may, you know, please jump in if you want to help clarify a point. Okay. Okay, this question, question 3-8, this is one that is a state question, and it is to determine the eligibility for the Public Library Assistance Grant because we require our library directors to receive continuing education. So it's one of those where if you click no, you don't see the second part of the question. But if you do click yes, then 3-9 kind of appears, and it's asking you to show, you know, type in what continuing education did you actually attend. And it can vary. It can be conference attendance, online courses, workshops, etc. And so it would just be helpful if you, when you're entering that data, include the name of the event, it'd be the date, the year, and even the location if you wanted to do so. Maybe it was the ACLA conference in Ketchikan, the ACLA conference, the 2017 ACLA conference in Ketchikan, and that information would be helpful. Sometimes I get these really vague descriptions and I have no idea of what the person's referring to, and it's not helpful. And so then I have to follow up with a phone call or something. And so just to save time, I'd appreciate it if people would just be very specific. Okay. So for people that receive ILC grants, those ILC grants can be paid with either state or federal funds. And this information is included in your award grant. So if your library received an ILC grant and you're unsure of how, how it was paid, you can contact us and we will provide you with that information. This field 4-2A, the Public Library Assistance Grant, that should be auto-filled. And then 4-2C, other state government revenue. If your library is receiving OWL internet support, that's where you could put that information. Okay. If your library received a CE grant, it should be reported in 4-3B. Sometimes people, they're not sure. Normally our CE grants are paid with LSTA funds. When you get that award letter, it says that on there. If your library, if a regional or village corporation has applied for a Native American Library Services basic grant from the IMLS on behalf of your library, you can record that information in 4-3C. Okay. Any questions about any of that? All right, E-rate reporting. So one of the things that happens is that a lot of libraries, they frequently fail to report or they underreport the amount of money they receive from E-rate. And I think it's because people aren't sure where to find that information. So I did reach out to Valerie Oliver, and she told me that libraries will find the information they need to report their E-rate if they go to their E-rate, the current E-rate application form 471. And every library is required by law to retain a copy of this form, and she says an electronic version is fine, for 10 years. So you should have it on file. You're required to keep it. And this form includes information on your library's total internet cost, your library's discount rate, and how much of your internet was paid by E-rate. So I did include a little screenshot of this form. And of course, it doesn't say that. I mean, that information is there, but it's not in that kind of a language. It's kind of in federalese. So I've kind of highlighted it here. So within each library's form, there's an internet funding request, which has a unique assigned funding request number for internet support, and most libraries only have only one funding request, and that is for the internet. And the FRN cost breakdown within the form is where you'll find the E-rate information you need. So the total cost of the internet is listed as total eligible pre-discount reoccurring charges. So in this example, the total cost of the internet for the library is $27,408. That's the total cost. The library's discounted rate is listed, and you'll see it's listed at 80%. And the amount of E-rate paid is listed as funding commitment request. And in this example, the total amount of E-rate paid is $21,926.40. So in 4-6, where it says E-rate cash or subsidy, for that library, they would need to put in the $21,926 and don't worry about the cents. Okay, we don't worry it. We try not to worry about cents. Just round it up or round it down. Any questions about E-rate? Okay. And also, you know, I didn't explain this earlier, but in the online form, you'll see what the previous data from last year. It's grayed out and it's to the right. So when you're inputting your information, if you notice that it's wildly different, you might want to. Sometimes that's an indicator that maybe something might be going a little screwy. Okay, so remember I told you about those edit checks that we've added, and you're going to see them when you get to the collections part. So you'll notice that all of the values for collection held have an edit check, which will be triggered if the same value as last year is entered. And everyone who receives a public library assistance grant is required to spend a certain amount of money on their collections, and they should be weeding their collections. So your collections should be changing year to year as you weed and add new information. If you're not comfortable weeding, you know, you might want to review the CREW weeding manual for modern libraries. Some of our libraries, I don't think they are comfortable weeding, and so this is a good manual to talk about what they should weed and when they should weed it. For libraries participating in the Alaska Digital Library, you'll be happy to know that Tracy Swaim is compiling stats for your use in the public library report. And you'll see that some of these ebook volumes, you know, what's withdrawn, added, and held. He's actually already started that and kind of posted some of it already. So here's an example, or here's part of it. He's working on the individual library part here. But for the shared collection of the Alaska Digital Library, this is what you should be adding in those fields, okay? Any questions about that? Okay. Here's the URL to get to that information. So Tracy noted this too, and he put, when he reached out to me earlier this week, he said to remind everybody, please don't fill out 7-8A, the locally licensed electronic collections. Don't put your Alaska Digital Library information in there, because the Alaska Digital Library has a checkout period, and it doesn't really meet the definition for what should be going in this collection, okay? So we don't want to add that information there. The statewide licensed electronic collections, I usually meet with Freya, and we actually go through and do an actual count of how many databases there are. That number varies year to year based on our funding, and we will be checking to make sure that that information is correct. I think last year it might have been 48. The year before it might have been in the 50s. So that number does change, and that's something that we kind of at the Alaska State Library will be checking. So, you know, do your best, and then we'll be confirming that as we check each of the submitted reports. Oh, I did want to talk about one more thing here. So if your library does have a local subscription to Mango Languages or lynda.com, you would be listing that information in the 7.A. I know some of you guys do have your own local collections of databases. I'm sorry, I didn't read. I'm probably missing the chat here. Let me see there. See, there's a question. Can multiple people get into the report? Oh, absolutely. So, you know, we have one username and one user login for each library, but the library can decide that multiple people can be adding information to the report, or they can be providing information to one person who's doing that. Are we all using AK Department of Labor stats? That information, like for the first part, like the population information and the legal service areas, that's something that we do at the state library. I'm not sure where people are getting their own local population stuff, but Patience and I, we go through and we kind of, we use the stats from the Alaska Department of Labor for legal service areas and the population. I exited, okay. Our Form 417 are anticipated costs, not actual costs. Well, according to the email I got from Valerie, it's a Form 471. So the form you should be using is 471, not 417. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. Did I have a typo on? I may have written that number wrong on the slide, but it should be 471 from the FCC. Okay. All right, I think that's all of the chat. Okay. So 471, according to I'm sorry, you guys, I'm kind of reading the information that I got from Valerie. Look at their current application. They can look at their application and know 3 important things about the internet. Well, according to her, that's where you should do it. Okay, talk about later. All right. Okay, moving on. All right. If your library doesn't collect juvenile circulation stats, you just need to enter a 0 for each value and add a note, such as library doesn't collect juvenile circulation stats, and and that's when being able to reuse that note over and over will be very helpful. So you'll just need to copy and paste the note into each of those fields that have an edit check. Okay. Okay, programming. So if your library is scheduling video conferences, you might want to record the number of sessions held and the number of participants. And I have this little picture here. Hopefully your programs, the programs that you report, you don't have this huge variation of the numbers of programs versus the number of people that attended. So in this example, we have like 35 programs where nobody attended. So I'm not sure what this library is actually counting. But just to clarify, a program is any planned event which introduces the target audience, and that could be adults, teens, or children, to the broad range of library services or activities that directly provide information for participants. And programs may cover the use of the library services, or library tours. Programs may be cultural, recreational, or educational. And you can count all programs, whether they're held on-site at the library or off-site, that are sponsored by the library. Now, you don't want to count programs that are sponsored by other groups that come in and use your library facilities. So if some local archery group is having a meeting and they're having it at their library, but it's really just for their members, they rented out a space or whatever, you wouldn't want to count that as a program. If a program is offered as a series, you want to count each program in the series. For example, if a film series is being offered once a week for 8 weeks, it would be counted as 8 programs. You don't want to count activities that are delivered on a one-to-one basis. Programs, need to think about a group. So you wouldn't count any one-to-one literacy or tutoring assistance or services to the homebound or any kind of homework assistance, that kind of thing. You really are just counting group activities that would be following under programs. Okay. So I don't recall which library it is, but they had 77 video conference programs and had 791 people attending. And those are legitimate stats. Oh, attendance. So this is another area that we see a wide variety of responses, and I think, if your library has a door counter that's counting it, that's fantastic. But a lot of our libraries don't, so they need to come up with some kind of system that that they can track the people coming into their library. And so when we talk about attendance, this is the total number of people entering the library for whatever purpose. They could just be coming in and reading the newspaper. They don't have to be engaged in a program or getting reference assistance or whatever. If you don't have a library door counter, you can keep track with tally marks. You can also kind of determine your attendance by selecting a specific week. It's been recommended that you don't select a week that's during your highest, like during the summer when it's super busy, or a period of time when it's super dead. You want to kind of pick a time when it's kind of is more generally representative of the attendance at your library, and keep track for a week of how many people are coming to the library, and then you can kind of multiply that by 52. So whatever you do, you just want to make sure that it's realistic, it's based on some kind of actual method, and you're not just reporting the same attendance year to year. And you can do the same with tracking reference questions. And I think some libraries aren't sure what really a reference transaction involves. So a reference transaction includes information and referral service as well as unscheduled individual instruction and assistance. So if you are helping somebody using live homework help, or accessing the SLED database, or finding a book in your shelves, or helping them, providing them with reader's advisory assistance, those are reference transactions. And again, if you don't have some method for tracking it, use tally marks. Have a tally mark placed on your desk where you can, mark it each time. Or again, you can do a similar thing where you pick out a week and you track it for a week, and then you multiply it by 52. Any questions about that? I see a question. Question, public service hours. Are those hours we are open? Yes. Yes, I do believe that is the case. Okay. And just one more thing about reference. So, again, with reference, whenever you're leading people to some information sources in your library, and that can be printed or non-printed material, that could be your own library catalog, that could be web-based, using contact information, all of that falls under reference. And I think libraries in Alaska are really under-reporting their reference transactions. Just to bring it home one more time. Okay. All right. Okay, so hopefully this webinar has alleviated any fear or trepidation you may have had regarding completing the public library report. It really isn't that scary. We are here to assist you the best we can. If you have any questions about completing the public library report, please let us know. And I know there's people in the state have been doing it for years, and so we have a lot of masters in the room here that are also, I'm sure, would be happy to share any of their expertise. So, we have any questions? You can talk to me if you'd like. No? Okay. How are you guys finding the online form? Is that been helpful? Are you liking that? Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you guys for attending. And I look forward to, I will, this was recorded, and we will be putting the slides up for you guys. Okay. on our archived webinars for Librarians website. All right, thank you.